Pro days are wrapping up rapidly across the country. The league meetings held this week. Some big changes coming to the NFL, maybe? Shane has had a lot of comps come out this week. Who were some surprising ones? And Travis May of Mojo is going to join us to talk about stocks in the NFL draft coming up next on the Draft Countdown podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Draft Countdown podcast. I'm your co-host, Brian Bosarge, joined as always as my co-host, Shane P. Hallam. Shane, 28 days, 22 hours, 58 minutes, and 13 seconds away from the 2023 NFL Draft.
We're getting close. Only 4 weeks. There's not many podcasts to go before the draft kicks off. So pro day stuff, you've been writing about that. It's been awesome, and it feels like we're just waiting for Christmas to happen here in a month.
Yeah, it feels like we only got maybe this week, I think, early next week. It'll be the end of the pro day circuit. Then we'll have some individual, pro days to sort out, between now and the end. But it's cutting down to the nitty gritty, as they say, with the NFL and the NFL draft. If you're watching along in the chat right now and you got a question, we're going to answer plenty of questions tonight at the end of the show, and you want yours answered, go ahead and ask it in the chat. Or if you're following along on Twitter, go to @Draft Countdown there and send your question in. We'll answer it. Or you can go to our Discord. And if you're not a member of our Discord, go to draftcountdown.com. It's in the upper right-hand corner of the search bar. Join our Discord. Lots of great discussion, and we'll have even more of it going between now and the NFL draft. So by all means, please join that. And let's chat over there on the Discord. But Shane had some meetings there this week out for the NFL. The coaches and owners met. Some rules changed, some rules not changed that we thought might get changed. But I think probably as far as we're concerned, maybe the biggest thing that came down was the cut day. Instead of it being spread out now, teams are going to go from a 90-man roster to a 53-man roster in one day. And that day this year is August the 29th, which I believe is on a Tuesday. So it's a benefit, I guess, for us because it's not happening on the first Saturday of full college football this year. So at least it's on a Tuesday, but it's going to be a lot to keep up with. That's a lot of guys. That's 34 per team. So 37 per team. A lot to keep up with.
Yeah, it's going to be a crazy day, right? I mean, the news aggregators are going to be going nuts, but I think it's great because now the late round picks, the undrafted free agents, right, all those guys that you kind of brought into camp just get more time to establish themselves. Maybe you find that gem. And if you've ever gone to a training camp, I mean, these undrafted players, end of the roster players don't get much time to prove themselves. I think it just gives you more of that opportunity. So I think it's a good thing from everything I've seen. I'm excited for it, and I hope we maybe get there's this third round pick who's not very good, not playing well. Now this undrafted free agent can actually beat them out. I think there's more of a chance of those things happen.
Yeah, a couple things there. It kind of makes that last preseason game maybe mean just a little bit more now for a lot of these guys. And I tweeted out when the news broke, that teams, you always hear the teams trying to sneak players onto the practice squad. Well, when there's 1,600 names going on the waiver wire at one time, it becomes a little bit easier to hide some of these guys you want to get to the practice squad, right?
Yeah, that's true too. I think teams are going to be a little more brazen in who they cut and try to sneak back on there. So that'll be a fun game to play. You might have to hire someone just to go through all 1,600 names and figure out who's available for you.
One other thing of note, I say it's of note, it's not really matter, I guess, but players are going to be able to wear number 0 now. We saw college football do this a few years ago. Now the NFL will allow players to wear 0. And maybe important to you, Shane, and you only, punters and kickers can now wear any number between 0 and 49 and 90 to 99. So the Bryce Behringers of the world entering the league next year will get to keep their collegiate number of 99.
Look, that's what matters. That's the real impact of the meetings here.
Yeah, obviously. Well, Shane, we've got a guest tonight, and something I'm definitely interested in learning about is some of this stuff that our guest coming on tonight is going to bring up here. He is the lead college football analyst at Mojo, and he is the host of the College to Canton podcast. He is Travis May. Travis, man, welcome to the Draft Countdown podcast.
Hey, glad to be here, guys. Always good to talk to my good buddy Shane. And Brian, I'm not sure we've actually been on a podcast before, have we?
I do not think we have. So it's good to meet you, sir. And I think my first question that I have, matter of fact, it's the only one that I have written down. I told Shane he was going to have to take the lead on this stuff tonight. But for people like me who are completely clueless here, what is Mojo and what does it do for people like me who are ignorant of the subject?
That's a great question because not many people are privy to Mojo like nationwide or worldwide just yet, because we've only actually been live anywhere at all since September of last year. But we are essentially the first fully regulated sports stock market / sports book type entity. So we are both regulated via, kind of a financial institution and sports book together. And so that makes things complicated for us, but great for, the user, because that means we can offer an environment that really feels like and acts like a real stock market, but also it means we can offer, kind of single game binary kind of bet type offerings as well. We launched with the NFL last year, and initially we just had these stocks that were career-long bets. And so essentially, like players like, your Patrick Mahomes of the world, they're way over $100 per share. But, the back of the roster players who are not even doing much at all from a week-to-week production basis, they might be $1 or even less in some cases. So there's quite, just like the real stock market, there's quite a range of type of players and assets that you can potentially invest in. And it's not like, a company, you're trying to bet on a future revenue and production, from a dollars and cents standpoint. It's based on real live NFL stats or whatever sport it is stats. And there's a key, objective formula, stats formula that's on our website and in the app and in the explanations, where you can kind of see, okay, this is how all the stats and all the value within the stock is accrued. And so every single player has, to their name, in the pros anyway, like part of their stock price that is their banked or accrued Mojo value. And then a portion of it is the future expected or projected portion of their price. And the idea is that you can go long or short betting for or against a player at any given price point. And, if a player does worse or a player does well, you can make some money in either direction. And so it's a lot of fun, because it is like a sports stock market. It really is. And it's not just career bets with the launch of NBA and even some college basketball stuff with March Madness. We've added some like single game type stocks that are essentially function, if you're familiar with like how, options work on the stock market, like call options or put options, where you're betting for or against a very short-term window, an outcome of an entire team or a specific player. Like within basketball, you could have, essentially a bet or a stock on a basketball player's assists for a game or points for a game. Or in the tournament, it was like total points in the tournament and so on and so forth. So it was really fun just to see people just love that. And the fun part is like the cash outs and the cash out options are actually fair and you can enter and exit at any time. It's not like a just straight up binary, did I win or did I lose? Like throughout every single game and throughout the off season and every bit of news that comes out, you'll see prices fluctuate. And so you can enter and exit at any given price point. It's up to you. So it's a lot of fun just overseeing specifically what I've been doing is the college portion and NFL draft prospect stuff. So that's the overview, but Mojo is going to be a blast when it's available everywhere. It's right now you have to be in New Jersey to play, to participate, to trade. But we're in process of adding several more states.
Well, Travis, you and I cut it up in the fantasy realm. So, Brian, not much of a fantasy football player as well. No. So we'll have to give him some credit. But, so you do a lot of analytical analysis there, plus the stock market with Mojo. So I think I'm just going to jump to maybe one of the most controversial prospects in this draft. And I want you to talk about him from both kind of perspectives. That's Anthony Richardson, the quarterback from Florida. Basically, how was his prospect at NFL success from an analytical perspective? And then tell me about the stock on Mojo through this process, as Richardson's been through the college season, his first full season starting, and now the off season, kind of a roller coaster. So I'm interested to hear about that too.
Yeah, it's interesting because like my background initially was all fantasy football, kind of shifted to more real football and building some nerdy predictive modeling for a couple of different sites, covering a few different teams. So I kind of have this a weird set of experiences where it's fantasy football, it's real college football, it's real NFL, and now I'm doing the sports stock market stuff. And so, but I think the sports stock market thing has really informed how I think about things through a fantasy football lens and a real football lens, because I get to see everyone's confidence or lack thereof in certain prospects. And Richardson's just been all over the place. But there have been a lot of people who have been extremely confident in him. And because of that, his price since last fall has risen like 300+% since I believe his declare date, which is just absolutely bonkers to see that meteoric rise. And that can be reflected all over Twitter, all over mock drafts. After the combine, he jumped all the way up to like plus 300 something to be the first overall selection in the NFL draft. So his stock has been incredibly high. But what's been confusing to me is that there is that much of confidence from so many people, considering from an analytical perspective, there's literally never in the modern history of the NFL been a successful player with such a poor passing profile ever. Not even remotely close. Like you all the comps that people throw out, like, oh, well, Lamar Jackson was this or Jalen Hurts was that. You could cut their like pass efficiency percentile in half and they would still destroy Anthony Richardson's trash profile. And so that's probably putting it nicely, by the way. And so there's so many questions. I see the upside. I see the athleticism. If he does succeed, it's because he's the best athlete to ever play the position, perhaps. At least the top 3 athlete at the position ever. But man, the amount of confidence that all the mock drafts and experts have in this player who's literally never done a freaking good thing throughout the entirety of one full game is just wild to me. So yeah, I mean, he could absolutely pan out because of the tools, and there are flashes of incredible runs against LSU, out routes that he just nails effortlessly on his first read. And there are moments where you think, oh gosh, he completely just nailed it. Like in between 3 defenders over the middle, leaping catch. It was fantastic. But there's so many quarterbacks that have those moments. He just had so few of them. And he's got such a short resume of less than 400, fewer than 400 total pass attempts to his name in college. He's an absolute wild card that people are just acting like, oh, obviously he's the 4th overall selection to the Colts. Just sign off and that's it. And that's just bonkers.
Number 99 overall on my board.
There you go. Hey, we got a sane person. Sweet. That makes at least one more of us.
I'm curious what the stock value is of quarterbacks who couldn't beat Vanderbilt in college. Just saying. But that's a running joke now on the Draft Countdown podcast. We don't need to get into.
Oh man.
I thought of a question here while you were talking, and I wrote it down. At this point in the NFL, the position of running back is devalued, right? I mean, if you give a running back a second contract, you pretty much committed salary cap suicide, right? If you're a team, or so it seems to be heading that way. So does Mojo like are you buying, like, if you're buying a running back stock at this point, and you can't really play the long game with that, right? Because it's only like for 4 years. So essentially, is that something that is this positional value, I guess, is where I'm getting here, something that is taken to effect with Mojo?
Absolutely. So I mean, the scale of and ceiling in terms of like expected price for all the positions are very well. They're just vastly different across the board. Like tight ends struggle to have, like, you're not going to see any tight end have a $100 price tag, even if it's Travis Kelce. It's like not even half that. It won't ever reach. Like there's never going to be a tight end that eclipses like $50 in Mojo value, because if I were to explain how the stats are accrued, the model is similar to like the modern expected points added kind of calculation, taking into effect yards and first downs, and there's an efficiency aspect to it, but it doesn't overweight rushing or receiving yards like fantasy does. So the guys that just accumulate a ton of yards like quarterbacks tend to have the higher price tags available to them. So like first round quarterbacks, they're in like anywhere from like the back end of a first round pick, $18 to $20 range, up to like closer to $50 if you're like a Trevor Lawrence type prospect. Like Lawrence, I think, IPO'd above $45, which is about the highest we've seen on the platform. But like running backs, you're even like a round 2 running back, you're not even going to be IPOing over $10, So yeah, it is definitely scaled by position, and there's a lot of value to be had still. Just like the real stock market, because it's all about the percentile increase. It's not necessarily about the dollars or the scale of the stock. It's about the percentile gained. But even like the guys who've been around for a while, they're not dead, because they're like, depending on how long they've been in the league and depending on how much expected future value you have on a player, there's going to be a higher multiplier available. So like an older player might have a multiplier of like 10x available. Like if player X's stock goes up 1% and you have a 10x multiplier on it, it goes up 10% instead of 1%. So there are fun ways to amplify the volatility.
So kind of leading into that, how does that affect a player like Bijan Robinson, who is expected first round pick? I also want to get your opinion how high you think he can go, because that debate is very interesting to me. Is going to come in as probably one of the best running backs in the NFL. Is it a situation where his value can continue to rise? And to you, Travis, how high do you think he's going to go in the NFL draft?
Yeah, this is kind of reshaped how I think of things in terms of like comparing prospects from a real football perspective, and like projecting out how long their career will be, as well as like through a dynasty lens. Because guys like Breece Hall, who have proven it on a small sample, had decent capital, and in many circles have been at some point, in the running back 1 overall conversation for fantasy purposes. And largely last year, where he was the consensus running back 1, Bijan actually, his initial IPO price was almost identical to Breece Hall's current price. Like they're both just over $13. But the initial buy action on Bijan suggested that there was quite a bit of confidence that he would be a better player than Breece Hall, which is funny because like that's what the real NFL sentiment is. And that's what, in many circles, I think most circles, that's what the sentiment is surrounding those two, even in fantasy as well. And so he's coming in at a range of, he's basically expected to be a mid-first rounder, or at least have a career like a mid-first rounder would. And so it's just fun because, like, we might IPO at a certain price, but the collective mind of the wisdom of the crowd and how they really put their money where their mouth is in this market space really speaks to a collective perception of every single player, which is so much fun. So Bijan right now, his price right now is not even half of what guys like LaDainian Tomlinson ended up producing. But it would be insane to project that kind of outcome for any prospect, even if you just can't know that someone's going to produce at that kind of level. But it will be interesting because there's definitely room to grow. If he becomes one of the most productive backs in recent memory, if he becomes like a productive guy like on the level of Ezekiel Elliott, Zeke's actually produced over $20 like of banked value already. So there's plenty of room to go up and perhaps even double or beyond.
Who are some of the skill position players? We'll just say running backs and wide receivers here that you've looked at so far in this draft class that you could say buy low right now because you think that their stock's going to go through. We'll, for the sake of this, we'll say buy low stocks, but we all talk about sleepers, right? So let's
sure.
Who are some running backs and receivers in this class that you could like say, hey, let's get them now before it gets hot?
Yeah, what's funny about my position is I'm not even technically allowed to give advice as explicit as that. But I will say there are some, just based on what I've seen in early activity, there's some confidence in guys like Zay Flowers. There's been rising confidence in mock drafts here recently. But I think a lot more people are coming around to the fact that, holy cow, this guy, he should probably perhaps even be in the wide receiver one conversation. Analytically speaking, in terms of like the production metrics that nerds like me appreciate, he's not necessarily perfect. He doesn't have the great peak to his profile per se, but he has 3 years of consistent production. And he's got 2 seasons under his belt that's where he actually scored more receiving touchdowns than anyone else in the ACC, which is a little rare for a guy of his size and his, archetype at the wide receiver position. And he tested more athletic than I think a lot of people thought he was. And so we had a kind of early VIP release with our market last week before all the players went live to the entirety of anyone on Mojo this week. And Zay Flowers was the most traded player. And so that was interesting to see that amount of confidence in a player who, until just recently, wasn't expected necessarily to be a kind of first round selection. So that's somebody that's definitely been intriguing. But even just today, like there's been a lot more interest in Cedric Tillman. There's been a lot more interest in, like Trey Palmer. He's just an incredible vertical threat. He might have hands issues from time to time, but man, like when you come in at the combine and you're the fastest guy there at the wide receiver position, that's going to turn some heads faster than, the wheels of Jalen Hyatt, which a lot of people thought he would be the fastest guy. So I think people are buying in and believing in very different kinds of players. I mean, like his 3 different, Zay is more of like, a lot of people think he's going to be a flex. I think he's a slot. I think he's more than that. But Tillman's like a player who would have probably gone round 10 years ago. And because if he's a big bodied X type who wins at the catch point, and then you got the straight line speed of Palmer. So there's all sorts of players in this class. A lot of small ones in this class, but those are just a few names that I know that the market has been interested in here recently. So we'll see if that continues. But running back, I think a lot of people are coming around on Chase Brown after his stellar combine performance, and that hasn't stopped since he actually kind of tested out as a really, really plus impressive athlete. So I don't think that's going anywhere. And I think a lot of people are also believing in Jahmyr Gibbs, of course. But if we're looking for a sleeper, I think a lot of people also might be interested in Dwayne McBride out of UAB. He didn't do all the testing at the combine, but he's somebody in terms of a big enough body to take a significant workload. He's somebody I'm paying attention to immensely because there's a lot of interest in him as well. I'm not sure how much capital he gets, but even if he just gets an opportunity to have some 1B level touches, that's a name that I'm definitely keeping an eye on.
So Travis, how do mock drafts essentially end up affecting the price, especially when we're talking about the NFL draft? I have to imagine there's some influence, right? Especially when the big names come out, or we start to see players, right, start creeping up the board and like guys that weren't expected. I know you definitely track that stuff a lot. How
Every day.
does kind of the yeah? I was like, probably way too much. You've seen way too many mock drafts. How does kind of the media mock draft affect affect what people do on Mojo, what those prices look like, since we're in this period you can't accrue any stats?
Yeah, that is, it's hard to weigh because that is one piece of the puzzle that we are constantly analyzing at Mojo in terms of how we would actually move the price on ourselves, regardless of any buying or selling action that's taking place. But when those big mock drafts do come out, that generally prompts some action. And so we're careful to not double count and overdo things with the price, but we do have to objectively listen to the market and move price on new bits of information, as well as the buying and selling action. It's really threefold. I mean, like any actual market, it's actual, like an actual stock or an actual company. It would be like actual performance, relevant news that comes out, and third, the buying and selling of any action surrounding player. And that's kind of how like dynasty fantasy football markets and values work, and like how a lot of the algorithms that affect like the trade calculators work. It's a constantly moving process. But yeah, the mock drafts do play a big part of it because they carry weight, especially this time of year. Just a peek a little bit behind the curtain. We have found that the impact or stickiness of mock drafting that takes place before the NFL Combine is pretty useless, like absolutely like hot garbage useless. So like if you're copying and pasting somebody's mock from, I'm not saying writing them before is useless. I'm saying that like in terms of actual predictive value, players start to change and solidify like where they're actually going to go after that point. But prior to, like, even large scale data shifts massively. So if you're copying and pasting mock drafts from November or January that still for some drunk reason had Tanner McKee going even in day 2, you're gonna look real dumb real soon. So it's just funny to see how that moves and when it's useful versus when it's not for our purposes.
Me and you seem to be on the same page with these quarterbacks. So just quickly, is Will Levis hot garbage too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's not like in terms of a passer as much of a problem just as Anthony Richardson is, like having very little positive to go off of there. Depending on how you adjust anyone's like analytical profile. Let's just talk that through because I want to get your take on that too. But like, so 2021, he comes into Kentucky. He's got an NFL level offensive coordinator, better offensive line than he had in 2022. It's just a great situation for him to thrive in. He's got like a legit wide receiver 1 in Wan'Dale Robinson, so he does good enough, right? Like it's not wild, but like he's a 60th, 70th ish, maybe if you squint, percentile pass efficiency guy. And then last year he struggled with health, and so he was imperfect. His decision making was questionable. He had a much worse offensive coordinator. He had much worse offensive line play. So the schematic effect on his profile weighed him down, and just from a raw numbers perspective. But if you get into the nitty gritty and adjust for all the external variables, including like play calling and play action percentage, jet motion percentage, his average depth of target, and look at things through like a few different lenses, like his completion percentage over expected, his adjusted yards per attempt over expected, and several other nerdy stats. Last year was actually more impressive because of all the external baggage surrounding him than 2021 is. So if you squint and say, man, 2021, he was gifted this perfection. 2022, he struggled on paper, but at the same time, he overcame things it was almost impressive to me. But at the same time, that doesn't mean he should be a top 10 pick. Like he is an early day 2 level prospect with nice biceps, so that's where I land. But I'm interested just to see how you guys process the difference between 2021 and 2022, and do either one of those peaks really make him, at first for early first round prospect? Because neither season does, and the collective profile together just falls short.
I'll go quickly because Shane can elaborate a lot more than I can. But even with 2021, there was a lot of holes in his profile to me, even with what all you said. And you're right. I mean, he did have a lot working against him, had the injury, the poor coordinator, the no real number one wide receiver this year at Kentucky. So you don't want to hold 2022 completely against him. But like I said, even if you go back and watch his tape 2021, I don't think he was a top 10 prospect coming into this class. Like, he was on some people's boards. I've got a 3rd round grade on him right now, early 3rd round grade. So I'm not convinced he's that either. And he also lost to Vanderbilt.
He did.
Both him and Anthony Richardson. So I'm not quite as low as Brian. I mean, I have both Levis and Anthony Richardson as round 2 prospects. I thought 2021, and you mentioned Travis, having the NFL offensive coordinator running an NFL offense, I think was like, you can see the translation pretty easily. I think that's what teams liked. And then when things didn't go so well this year, now does he need everything to be successful? I think he needs the exact right situation, almost Mac Jones on steroids. Like, you need the right thing for that to work.
That's interesting. I feel like we're kind of on the same page there. Yeah, to me, it's like round 2-ish, but I get that everyone, if they think that there's any chance they could be the guy, they have to reach into early round 1, but it just feels so wrong.
We do have Brad Menendez, draft countdown writer. Brad, Travis, and I are in a fantasy league together. So commenting, Travis hasn't brought out any charts. I thought you'd share the screen and bring out the charts, Travis.
Yeah, I mean, I could if you just let me take over the screen here. Yeah, get some of those for Brad and all of our pinnacle of Devy league mates. We are 2,000 rounds into our Devy draft, by the way. So
2,000. Yeah. What? And someone took Travis's son. So.
Or 2,000 picks, rather. So
2,000.
Oh yeah,
picks.
yeah. Dwight, shout out Dwight if he's listening. I was on his show this week too. Dwight drafted my son, who is 16 months old.
So you never know. You got to get him early, Brian. You sure you don't want to be in these fantasy leagues, Brian? It's a blast.
Yeah.
For since you don't know, I'm partners at Draft Countdown with Shane, who's like in 712 fantasy leagues of different kinds. I'm in one. With 9 other people at my work, and that's it. Last question for me, and I'll give Shane one more question. We'll let you go. In this regards to your College to Canton podcast and stuff of this nature, Mojo, and this question gets asked a lot involving college football. Do stars matter?
Oh man, I'm gonna need another podcast to just break down that.
Let's give me the Cliff Notes.
Okay, Cliff Note answer is yes. Roll credits. But like seriously, like immensely so, and more now than they ever have. In fact, like when we first started tracking stars in the early 2000s, they were absolute garbage. All the services were terrible. They had awful sources. Like if you ever looked at film, like any kind of production via video from the year 2000 and thought, there's no way it looked that bad. It was just the resources that we had to make the right decisions in terms of scouting were just zilch. And so the hit rate was atrocious. Like even 5-star level prospects were getting drafted at like a 50% clip or less in some classes. Fast forward to the most recently, expressed or drafted, fully matured recruiting classes, like from 2013 to 2017. Almost 100% of players from 2017 have been drafted at this point, even the extra COVID eligibility guys. And so like 2013 to 2017, the hit rate for, top level 5 stars went from below 50% in the early 2000s to 70% of those players get drafted now, which is just bonkers. Like almost doubling the hit rate from the previous early decade. And it's wild. Like a quarter of all 5 stars get first round capital at this point, regardless of position. And it's only accelerating. So the services are getting a lot better at identifying pro level traits from an earlier age. We can basically safely project 16, 17-year-olds that that player's getting drafted. I don't know where, but he's getting drafted pretty certainly, unless something goes off the the ledge, or they, just people get in trouble, or, they have mental health issues. They're, real stuff happens. But for the most part, the hit rate is becoming ridiculous. So in terms of like top tier 5 stars, we're reaching a point like this year, especially, where we're going to see a ridiculous number of guys with absurd pedigree just littered across the first round. Like over the course of the like last 20 years or so, like only a quarter or so of round 1 you might see be like true 5 stars, another quarter maybe a little bit more 4 stars, and actually more 3 stars than 4 or 5 getting drafted. But that's because there are like 40 times the amount of 3 stars as there are like 5 stars, and there's like 4 or 5 times the amount of 3 stars as there are 4 stars. And so when people want to say, well, what about Cooper Kupp? Well, what about so-and-so? Like, cool, you're right. They are the exception to the rule. Like, in every single draft class, there's like 250,000 kids all competing for the same star ratings. There's, between all the services, like 45 stars, 400 4 stars, 2,000 3 stars. And then the rest of the, 248,000 kids that are 2 stars and below, like they're all competing. And out of those 248,000 kids that didn't get a 3-star rating or better, maybe 5 or 6 will get first round capital. So like the expected hit rate is a little bit different. So stars absolutely matter from both a team building perspective and draft capital projection perspective. It's wild how accurate the services are becoming.
No, it's great info, and I love listening to your podcast. Back and when we broke those down was awesome. My last question, then we'll let you go, Travis. Real quick, just give us, whether it be the Mojo stocks or some of your interjections, top 3 or 4 college players, right now in terms of Mojo price, and that obviously looking to have a high first round picks next year or beyond.
Well, the number one, the obvious, I'm just so stupid high personally on Caleb Williams. I've wanted my Titans to just go 0-17, please. Like don't even posture like you care about winning, please. Do not. And he's currently priced at like $37, which is a little bit cheaper than Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, but it's still actually more expensive than Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, because he's just the lockiest lock of locks, to go a first round next year. It's one of those situations where he could just sit out. He would have been the first overall pick this year. He could just pull Jamar Chase and be like, nah, I'm good. I'm just going to, root my teammates on, but I'm going to go first overall next year. And so that's just an intriguing play, because I just want to see his career play out. He could maybe fail, but it sure seems like that's impossible. So he's one that I'm interested in. Drake May seems to be the consensus quarterback too, and yet he's actually $21 right now and rising, $21 and change. And so he's actually cheaper than Will Levis. So that's been interesting to track. I mean, there have been people interested in him, but maybe because he's a year out, people are just less interested in that. But beyond that, Quinn Ewers has been all over the place because people don't know what to do with Arch Manning coming in. But he's actually below $15 now for the first time, I believe, ever since he's been on the platform since last fall, because people are thinking, hey, Arch Manning could take over. So, there's still upside with Ewers. Like the version of Ewers that we saw against the first half of Alabama before he went down with injury last year, that was like a first round kind of quarterback. So if we see that player again and Arch Manning stays on the bench and is redshirted effectively this year, that could be really fun too. So those 3 are super fun right now. But there's several other guys that are under $10, like Jordan Travis, who's still, I think, top 5 or 6 to be, in the Heisman conversation for this year. Michael Penix, who absolutely just balled last year for Washington. I know if he can stay healthy for one more year, that's a bet in and of itself. But he's under $10 too. So lots of guys like that on the platform, and several more to be added shortly after the NFL draft at several other positions like running back, wide receiver, and tight end here soon. My hope is that by the fall, we have 300 plus college players on the platform all ready to go. So that's the goal. But there's plenty of players to be excited about moving forward for next year. It's looking like a pretty stacked class, a fun class.
Yeah, Shane's already released 17, 20, 24 mock drafts already.
At
So
least,
we've
right?
They're like
we've
12.
seen
Come
these
on.
things. Like if you go to mock draft database, there's Shane and nobody else. It's crazy, especially for 2025.
Man.
He's the only ones of it. It's wild.
Hey, my buddy Stefan, I think he's he actually just asked me to look over some stuff for one he's going to be having it coming out, I believe, at Rotoviz here soon. So you'll have some competition.
All right, yeah, let's
so I'll tell Stefan to hurry that up.
Wild. Travis, man, it's great to meet you and great to learn about some of this stuff, even if it's something. Well, one, I live in Alabama, I can't legally gamble anywhere. Yeah. But it's great to learn about this stuff and great to figure this stuff out. And Shane's talked you up to me and off chat, and it was great to hear all this information. I'm so glad you joined us tonight.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys invited me and had me on. And it is. I mean, even if you're not in the state, like you can download the app wherever and look at the prices wherever. We had Nick Ercolano, who is what the big dogs got to eat. They had that like NFT kind of big launch last year. It was a huge event for fantasy football purposes. And he actually just made a 20-minute video just breaking down some of our pricing and just using it like to help him with dynasty fantasy football. And so it was amazing just to see how it could be applied just from a nerdy numbers perspective, just because it adds another layer to your game, another set of data to help you out. And I'm all for finding as many assets as I can. It doesn't cost anything to just download and check it out and look at the prices move and see what the real stock market of players values a certain player as.
Good stuff, man.
But I appreciate it. I'll leave you guys be so you guys can talk about Shane 2027 NFL mock draft. But you guys take care, and I'll talk soon, Shane.
No, thanks, Travis. Yeah,
nice
thanks
to meet you, Brian.
Man. It was great.
That was Travis May of Mojo. Good stuff there, man.
Different, unique, which I think is always exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different take on stuff that we don't normally talk about in a way that we normally do. So it's a good to get that perspective out there as it is. But Travis May, download the app Mojo.
Check it out. It is worth even just looking at prices. And Travis is such a good analytical mind too. He's great to have on. And when people are putting money where their mouth is on betting on these players in the draft, that's that means something.
Absolutely. All right, Shane. So we got a few other topics to talk about before we start answering our questions. This just I guess talking about gambling got me to thinking about this. We're about a month out. Not a whole lot of props out there yet. I'm looking at Bovada and just a couple he said Zay Flowers and talking about potential wide receiver 1, and that's what popped it in my head. So I wanted to go look. And right now at Bovada, you can get Zay Flowers as wide receiver 1 off the board at plus 750. So could be a worthwhile gamble to take. In case you were wondering, JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba, wide receiver, Ohio State, minus 250, the odds-on favorite right now to be the first wide receiver off the board. My wide receiver number 1 is Quentin Johnston from TCU, plus 350. The people at Bovada, I don't know if they're trying to just what they're doing here, but Rome Odunze from Washington is listed.
Still on there.
Despite not being in this draft class, but plus 10,000. That's a sucker bet. Don't take that.
Why don't more books do that? Just tossing Marvin Harrison Jr. Like just
make up a name.
Free money, right?
Yeah. So is any of those Jordan Addison, by the way, plus 550 there. Jalen Hyatt plus 1,000. Anything jump out at you, or you think it's going to be JSN?
I mean, I think it'll be JSN, but I probably would bet on Quentin Johnston. Like if you're watching this live right now, because tomorrow's his pro day, right? Like that number is going to change. I think JSN will still be the favorite, but I do think when Quentin Johnston works out, he's going to, jump up there to plus 100 mark, perhaps.
Intriguing to me is first tight end off the board. Current betting favorite, Michael Mayer, minus 120. But you can get Dalton Kincaid at plus 175. And the one that interests me is Darnell Washington at plus 275. Just his size and athletic profile, I think that could lead a team to maybe take him as the first tight end off the board. Not sure I would agree with that assessment, but I think that's something that could happen.
Yeah, I actually think Darnell Washington has a decent shot. I like the plus 275 there. And Michael Mayer was plus money before Dalton Kincaid didn't work out at Utah's Pro Day. So, yeah, it's something to keep an eye on this last week is when those Pro Days are. And, if you're going to bet on the draft, you can actually probably get all of them at plus money if you play your cards right in terms of time.
Interesting here because we've talked about the very real chance that Tyree Wilson could actually be drafted ahead of Will Anderson. First defensive player selected, Tyree Wilson, currently at plus 650.
I thought, as much as I love Will Anderson, I think I would take that bet because it wouldn't surprise me if a team like Arizona wants that size or someone trades up there. Seattle, I think, would probably maybe much rather have a Tyree Wilson than a Will Anderson. I don't think it'd be a smart choice, but that isn't always what happens. So I like that at that number. I like that a lot.
How about first corner, Joey Porter Jr. plus 800?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I do think Witherspoon and Gonzalez, Devin Witherspoon of Illinois and Christian Gonzalez of Oregon are a step ahead both. But shocking maybe for that number one corner. I don't know where their numbers are at right now.
Gonzalez minus 190, Witherspoon plus 175. The next one after that is Brian Branch, who's plus 2,000. So it's basically those three.
Interesting. Yeah.
Now, interesting though, I say that Deontay Banks is plus 5,000.
I might put $1 on that one.
That seems like a buck worthy bet right there.
Yeah,
right?
just toss it in and get $50 if I don't know if there's anything that's going to raise his stock, but I think a team could take that shot.
I just did it.
Live on the podcast, Brian Benton.
Last one, and we'll move on. First offensive lineman off the board. Your guy, Paris Johnson Jr., minus 150 is the favorite. Part of me likes the numbers here on Darnell Wright at plus 1,100 and Broderick Jones at plus 450.
Yeah, I mean, I think Broderick Jones is worth a bet. I think that number is going to come down as time goes on.
Skoronski plus 150.
Plus one. Yeah, I think Broderick Jones should be more in line with Skoronski, so that's probably where I'd go. Darnell Wright, I think might be getting pushed up a little too high for a right tackle, but you never know.
Yeah. All right, so we'll close out the draft props there. Shane, you've had 3 or 4 comp articles come out now. I believe it's 3. And your final one comes out on Friday, which will be the linebackers, DBs, and special teams players. Of the comps you've done so far, who have been some of the more surprising ones that, like, when you put it together, you're like, did not see that coming?
It's been interesting because it's always a fun process, and I outline it ahead of each article.
Well, first of all, let's explain that you're comping them to as these prospects, these players were coming out of college as you scouted them in their draft class, not how they become as professionals. So if you comp somebody to, I don't know, just
Jamarcus
Russell, you're comping them to what we thought of Jamarcus Russell as a prospect, not the complete eternal flop that he became as an NFL passer.
Right. And people criticize that, like I comped CJ Stroud to Alex Smith, and people were like, how could you do that? Alex Smith, who wasn't awful, was awful. He's the number 1 overall pick. He was like super accurate and was athletic enough to move. Like my notes matched up. They're both top 5 picks on the draft. So I think that's key to keep in mind because it's different from what a lot of other people do. Just like, this guy's going to be as good as insert Hall of Famer. So, let's comp that. And that's not what I do. I use the athletic testing and size that we've seen from Raz. I use draft capital and try to match it up that way. And then my scouting reports is really usually the final piece is kind of matching. Hey, go back and read what I wrote about this guy. Wow, it's the same thing I wrote about the player in this draft. Let's do it. So there have been a couple interesting ones. Jordan Addison, I think, was an interesting one. is I comped him to Jeremy Maclin, a receiver out of Missouri. If you remember, Maclin had a pretty solid NFL career, but I remember looking at kind of the route running and the lack of that deep speed, and it wasn't the athleticism, but kind of the sure way of cutting and running every route the same. And then I put the Rask against each other. I was like, whoa, this is like really close. I love when that happens, when it's like, oh, this player matches up. So that was an interesting one. Maybe a controversial one, but one of my guys end up comping to who ended up being an excellent NFL player, but it's Tucker Kraft, the tight end out of South Dakota State, to Travis Kelce. Both dealing with injuries in college, was a big knock on them that knocked them down, but two-way players that were really good against zone coverage in college. Good after the catch, tough, not super, good athletes and maybe better athletes than that they tested better than they played. So I'm like, I'm gonna put it out there because I think I like Tucker Kraft a lot. I don't think Travis Kelce would be doing what he's doing in the NFL, but as a prospect day 2 guy, I think it makes sense. And then on the defensive side, we just talked about Tyree Wilson. I comped him to Tamba Hali, the edge rusher out of Penn State, if you remember him. And kind of a disappointing NFL career. It wasn't bad, it wasn't great. But having that kind of big body, hand usage, explosion off the line, Tamba Hali really wrecked a lot of teams, but didn't necessarily have that big production. Same with Tyree Wilson, right? Doesn't have that big production, but you kind of see it on film. So those were 3 that I liked, but I think there's a bunch of nice gems in there if you go and read that, especially if you followed the draft or the NFL for a while. It's fun.
I was, because you're not the only person I've seen make the comp with Anthony Richardson, not to go back to him again, but to Dante Culpepper as a prospect coming out of UCF. And when I saw that, I'm like, that makes a whole lot of sense because Culpepper played when he was at UCF, wasn't the most accurate guy, but had a lot of tools, very athletic. Anthony Richardson would love to have the career that Dante Culpepper had.
I mean, Culpepper was the NFL MVP, right? I think he maybe shared it or was in the finals. He was very close. That would be great. Like if Anthony Richardson has Culpepper's career, that'd be great. There's a couple guys like that. I reached further back than I've really scouted. But I remember Dante Culpepper as an NFL player, and what his statistics and athleticism look like. Richardson was tough to comp, but I think Culpepper, I could see that because even in the NFL, Culpepper was not a guy that could hit every receiver, right? I mean, he's tossing it up to Randy Moss and Chris Carter, and I think that helped him. But I think it's a perfect kind of match for Richardson and what he can be if things go well.
Another thing with that comp is if, let's say, Richardson ends up being the 3rd or 4th quarterback off the board, which we expect him to be one or the other, Culpepper, was he the 5th quarterback off the board in 99? Or was he the 4th?
I think he was the 5th, if I remember correctly.
Let's see. You had Couch, McNabb, Achilles Smith, Cade McNown, and Dante Culpepper. So, yes. Yep. So he was the 5th. So, yeah, that's interesting. Another way to look at it.
No, it looks like he went 1 pick before Cade McNown. He was 11th, and McNown was 12th. So they were right. I mean, that's draft. We had 1, 2, 3 quarterback, then 11, 12 quarterback. So it was a loaded class, and most of them weren't very good.
Only 2. I wasn't expecting this to be this late in the show with this question, but it's fine. There's some big questions remaining that have a huge impact on the NFL draft still hanging over, and we don't have to go in great depth here, but to me, the biggest questions involve 2 veteran quarterbacks right now. What happens with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore? Does he end up getting traded before the draft? And when does the Aaron Rodgers, New York Jets, Green Bay Packers menage a trois have its resolution?
I don't think we get a menage a trois drop in the podcast today, but here we are now. No, you're right. I mean, it's going to affect the draft. Maybe not the first round. Like, I mean, Lamar Jackson would if he gets traded, obviously. but I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to. And some of the reports today is that he won't. But it's going to make a major impact on what teams are looking for. Now what becomes positions of need for these squads, and what's other ways you can do it. I think those two are big question marks. That's going to affect the draft. So I'm with you.
The other questions are and it's not something I think we're gonna be privy to until the draft itself, is what happens with Jalen Carter. Is his atrocious pro day, do people chalk that up to what was going on? He's essentially, his legal proceedings are over. So are teams putting that behind them, moving forward? He obviously has immense talent, but the off the field concerns are there. So I think that's another big question that's going to shape the top 10 of the draft.
Yeah, it is, because he could still be a high top 5 pick. He could fall to the 10th spot, around the 10th spot, 9, 10. He could fall further than that. We've seen players that's happened to them, and things come out after the fact, or hey, there's already questions, and then this happened. So I think that's going to have a major impact. I even think quarterback. We talked a lot of quarterback today, but one we haven't talked about is Hendon Hooker starting to get some first round buzz. Now, I think it's the time of the year, and every draft, the day 2 quarterback gets first round buzz. Seems to happen every single year. But how do teams feel about him? How's the injury? How's the medical? We're never privy to that information. I think that's a big question that maybe we'll get some clarity here coming up.
If Hendon Hooker does end up in the first round, and I've gone, I have him rated ahead of Levis and Richardson. It has to be to a team, a playoff team, right? That is not set at quarterback beyond this year. I'm looking at Minnesota with Kirk Cousins, and teams like that maybe can take that redshirt year for Hooker and then move forward after that.
Minnesota, Seattle, Detroit, there are teams out there. I think even a team like Washington, where, you have Sam Howell, and they're not a playoff team, but they weren't too far off, and, you could take them. I think it's interesting. I still don't plan on having him in the first round of a mock coming up anytime soon, but the final one, we'll see where the buzz is at.
Yeah, we're a good bit away. All right, so we've got plenty of questions on Twitter. We didn't get any on Discord or in the chat tonight, so let's just go in order here. At Draft Day 101 asked on Twitter, and speaking of Lamar Jackson, would you rather have Will Levis for the next 5 years or Lamar Jackson? This is a loaded question.
It is, and you and I have discussed on the show now a couple times how much we're not huge fans of Will Levis. I'd rather have Lamar Jackson, but you got to pay the money and you got to pay the draft pick price, and that's tough, I think, to swallow. To be super confident that Lamar Jackson is the guy for those 5 years and everything's going to go well. So I understand the trepidation a little bit, but I'll give up the picks. I'll give up 2 first rounders plus a player and pay the money. Give me Lamar Jackson in right now.
Here's what people I don't think are quite grasping with Lamar Jackson. The question here is with Will Levis. Will Levis will be as a 24-year-old rookie. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Hendon Hooker will be a 25-year-old rookie. Will probably be 26 before he takes his first NFL snap. Lamar Jackson's 26 now and has won an NFL MVP. So I'm with you. The problem, like you said, but the question, the flip side, like you said with Jackson, you're going to have to pay him over $200 million guaranteed, I would think, is where we're going.
Yeah.
And it's going to cost you multiple first-round picks, at least 2, maybe more. Maybe more draft picks, maybe some player compensation going back. As I figure it's not going to be the 2 first-round picks. I figure it's going to be some sort of a team will work out a contract with them. They'll go to Baltimore. Hey, let's make the deal, and it'll be I think it'll be some Russell Wilson type compensation, maybe even Deshaun Watson compensation going back, something of that nature.
I don't think it happens. I don't think he's going anywhere.
So you think he stays in Baltimore?
Yeah.
We'll see. But the answer, I think, for both of us at Draft Day 101 is we would rather have Lamar Jackson, even at the money and the draft picks. My buddy Tom Justin, I'm Nostradamus over at Bengal Gym Podcast. Do you see it making any sense for a team to trade out of the first round this year? The answer is yes. It always makes sense. I know who he's referencing here. He's referencing the Bengals at pick 28. Yes. Anybody that's picking in the bottom half of the first or the bottom 5-6 picks of the first round should take every single phone call from anybody in the top 6 or 7 of the second round just to see what you can get. Because you got to think that you're not getting anyone like, unless the player that you absolutely covet falls to that pick, you should listen, because there's going to be at least 3 or 4 players similarly stacked on your board that's going to fall to you 10 picks later. So yes, everybody should take that call and get an extra 4th round pick.
And we usually hear, right, teams first round graded prospects, 15, 16 guys, right? So if you're picking in that back end, you don't have a first round grade on anyone that's still there. Yeah, you should listen. I do think the 5th year option makes it harder than it used to be to say, yeah, I'm going to back out, right? Is that you might cost yourself a year of a player that you obviously think is really good. I think the most likely teams are probably the Seahawks, the Eagles. Both their GMs moved down a lot, though I think both, especially the Eagles, could move down their earlier pick in the first round to do that. But that would be my guesses. Yeah, I think teams should. I think it's smart.
Minnesota as well. It was definitely the case when Rick Spielman was a GM, but they also moved around a lot last year as well. Yeah. So could be a candidate to move out. The Bengals, one of the least likely candidates to move out, is they tend to just not trade a lot on draft day. As much as I would love them to, they just don't do it. At K English DS asks, favorite sleeper running back. Shane, I know you've got a whole host of these.
I got 3 for you. Probably the one that actually has a chance to get drafted. We'll start with first. And that's Deneric Prince, the running back out of Tulsa. I think is really good. Israel Banaconda had a really good pro day today. Deneric Prince wasn't too far off. He's similar size and had a really good combine. Like he's good on film, catches the football, explosive. I think for a late round day 3 running back, you could do worse. I like Lou Nichols out of Central Michigan, was productive until he got hurt and kind of lost the backfield there. Not a super athlete. And then my deep sleeper is Emmanuel Wilson, the running back out of Fort Valley State. I've been impressed with, like, size. He's shifty and kind of has become my top small school running back in this class.
I've talked about Keaton Mitchell a lot, and I think he's going to go on day 3, but that home run hitting ability, man, I love it. And I mean, day 3, I think that's sleeper, right? I mean, yeah, feels good. I don't know that he'll be drafted, but I'm going to call it a major college program guy. He had a great pro day. Christopher Brooks from BYU was productive, looked great in the Hula Bowl. When he played, thought he should have been in a more high-profile all-star game than the Hula. And, yeah, so I don't really have a deep guy like you. I've only got 40 guys on my board, Shane. I haven't quite made it to the 80 that you have yet. But those are some running backs, so sleeper guys.
I think it's good.
Our good buddy at Draft Guy Jimmy, speaking of the Hula Bowl, one of the scouts for the Hula Bowl. Yeah. Give me some surprise players who may not get drafted. So if they go undrafted, Shane, you're going to be surprised.
I came up with 6 guys. Stetson Bennett, I think, is one. Maybe that's not the most surprising, but I think at this point everyone kind of feels like, he'll be drafted. Receiver Kayshon Boutte, I think, could go undrafted. Sat on his 4.5 for the combine, which isn't like awful, but
the sitting on the 29.5-inch vertical is that's the
awful problem. Doesn't play special teams, right? Receiver doesn't play special teams. It's a problem. Cornerback Eli Ricks, We've talked about he's been kind of a day 2 guy, had a disappointing pro day, especially the agility drills wasn't great. Safety Brandon Joseph out of Notre Dame was a first round potential prospect. I think that safety position gets murky on day 3. Then 2 that I think will get drafted, maybe even decently high. So I'm taking long shots here. Ole Miss running back Zach Evans and Utah cornerback Clark Phillips.
I can't see. Well, just with the production alone, I can't see Clark Phillips going undrafted.
I think it's
early day 3. I don't think he ends up in the first 2 days now. I'll say that just because I think he's a pure slot now. But
I think the percentage is low that he goes undrafted. But so I'd be surprised.
I'll give you one run. You name it. Keishon Butte was my main one. I would have said here. I'll give you a running back that I still like him a lot, but he may not get drafted. Sean Tucker, Syracuse.
Oh wow!
I mean, we're going to get no testing from him at all. So I'm curious as to what his injury, like how bad is his injury worse than we think? It seems to be one of those ones where at the end of the draft, you see a report out from Schefter that chronic knee injury or something from Sean Tucker or something like that caused him to go undrafted. I don't know. It feels weird about that. Last one here from @JoeAtWork87. If the NFL scriptwriters insist that the Big Four quarterbacks need to succeed, what 4 teams give them the best chance to do so?
This actually made me think a lot because it's interesting, right? If we're not limiting it to, I limited it to teams that still kind of need a quarterback. But if we're not worried about where in the draft. So I think my big one's Will Levis. I think it's Seattle. I think Pete Carroll could handle the big personality. I think Will Levis needs weapons. They have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker. Like I think it would be a good situation, good offensive line. I think he kind of needs that structure to do well. Anthony Richardson, I think, is Minnesota. I think Kevin O'Connell's offense could work. Sit for a year, similar to Levis in Seattle, right? I think both need to sit for a year. Richardson
Detroit is where I like Richardson.
You like Detroit there? So, a similar thing, right? He's going to sit behind Goff. I actually put CJ Stroud in Detroit. I think he would. That accuracy with those weapons and that the coaching staff, I think would be great. And then Bryce Young to me was Indianapolis. I think that Streichen offense, like we saw with Jalen Hurts, I think Bryce Young would flourish.
I like it.
That's my thoughts. You can share yours.
Those were good because my only problem with Indianapolis is I don't think they're very outside of like core positions. I don't think they're very good. So Atlanta's the same way. I think there's just a lot of filler there. The Raiders, I think, are not good either outside of wide receivers. So
I agree with the Raiders. I agree with the Raiders. I think the Falcons make the playoffs, so we can debate that another day.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. All right. Final thoughts, Shane, on this went longer than I thought we were going to go tonight, but that's okay.
Look, it's a month, less than a month to the draft. We got to start. We got to go long, right? I mean, this is the time.
You're right.
So
You're right.
I'm excited. 4 weeks. 4 weeks away. I'm pumped.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. I love it. A lot of content up. We're gonna have a lot of team specific mock drafts coming up in the next week. I got a Browns one coming up on Saturday. Brad's got Chiefs coming up tomorrow. On Sunday, Miranda. The next 2 Sundays, Miranda's going to look at the biggest need for each team in the AFC and in the NFC. Their biggest team needs after free agency. So see what your favorite team's going to be looking at. And Shane's going to finish up his comp articles. That's Friday's the last one. And then Shane, we're starting to get your notes.
Yeah, it's scouting report season. So I'm shooting for over 1,000 prospects again this year. We'll see if I can make it happen.
Yeah, Shane's been just openly gasping every time we get a +8 RAS from some offensive lineman in Humboldt State or something.
Yeah, so, Davenport. We got I'm like, I got to try to find this.
Baldwin Wallace got added to the to the list yesterday.
That's close enough that I feel like I can find it. So
Yeah, it's apparently a D3 school.
It's close to me.
Where.
It's close. It's
Really?
in Ohio. Yeah, it's in Ohio. It's not too far from me. So
Well, there you go.
yeah.
So you at least knew what they were.
I
had
did
no
know
idea.
Baldwin Wallace. Yeah.
How about that? No. That's going to do it for tonight's episode of the Draft Countdown podcast. If you're new to the channel, hit that like button on the videos. Subscribe to the channel, man, because it's going to be hot and heavy these next few weeks, especially the live stream. We would love to have our subscriber numbers get over 500 between now and the draft. That'd be awesome if we could if we see them kind of numbers. If you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, give us a 5-star review on there. Share it out amongst everybody. Share the YouTube channel out. Let's get the word out. Follow me on Twitter at Deep Fried Draft. Follow Shane on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam. Follow Draft Countdown on Twitter at Draft Countdown. Go to draftcountdown.com for all of your NFL draft needs between now and a few weeks after the NFL draft. We're here for you. That's it, everybody. Good night.